Welcome, everyone, to a very exciting evening with the Berlin Functional Programming Group. I am pleased to introduce my friend, Justin Wu. What can I say about Justin? He is a man of many talents, a physicist, a programmer, a foodie. Sometimes he's actually very funny. Other times he just thinks that he's very funny. And tonight, I think he's going to be giving us an extremely engaging discussion about why he talks about Nix all the time. At least that's my impression from his talk description and what we discussed before scheduling this meetup tonight. I think I've known Justin now for, I don't know, 5 years? I can't even remember. I think I actually met you on this Slack group. And then one day you DM'd me and said, I'm coming to Berlin. Can I stay at your place? And I believe this is how Justin typically operates. So a friendship was born, and actually Justin spoke to the Berlin Functional Programming Group in the past in person. He's one of the rare live speakers that we've had back when we actually were meeting in person. So I wanted to have him back finally for a repeat visit and a repeat performance. Justin, I'm very pleased to have you. I'll be even more pleased when you are able to visit me in Berlin again. But until then, this will have to suffice. Ladies and gentlemen, the incomparable Justin Wu.
Thanks, Stephen. Well, I'll try to live up to the intro, but yeah, I'm a very weird person, so I'll try my best.
Yeah. Great. One more thing. If you have a question for Justin, go ahead and either type your question into chat or just say, I have a question, and I will interrupt him so you can ask.
Okay, works for me. All right, so hopefully my OBS setup doesn't disturb anyone. I'm just trying to make sure that well, at least you can see like when I'm like gesturing at things, hopefully, and then maybe you might have to look at my editors and stuff, but probably not. There's really nothing like too important over there. But yeah, I'll just start on talk, and then if something comes up, then we can like go over to editor view and like go do whatever stuff. So yeah, this talk is called Why Nix Shorts. So it's going to be about like my blog post series, kind of like a short series of articles I wrote about Nix, and these are like just some short articles I wrote just to like actually just introduce Nix to like new users and like to people I knew who like knew a bit about Nix but wanted to learn how to do something specific. So yeah. So this talk really isn't about like Nix itself, but we will recover Nix. So like people who are here to learn a bit about Nix will be able to learn some of it. And then we'll also like review Nix shorts as a result. So people who have read it will just get like a review, and then people who haven't read it will just hear about it for the first time. And yeah, I'm going to talk about like after talking about the Nix shorts, then I'll talk about like why I wrote the Nix shorts, and then I'll talk about like some of the things I did in that, and then some of the things I would like for documentation or like articles to do in future. So yeah, Nix shorts is like this series of posts I wrote between August and October in 2019. So quite a while now, though, you know, before pandemic time. So it feels like it was supposed to be like last year or something. But yeah, these are 6 independent posts, right? So there's not really a required reading order to them. And that was on purpose, that these are supposed to be 6 independent things. So they go like your first derivation, work with Nix shells, work with specific packages, installing things to your Nix profile, and like just talking about what the profile is generally, installing things like packages from like files and inspecting some of the values with the REPL, and just like looking at some of the most like basic things you can do with the REPL to figure out like how to solve some like specific problems or whatever. By the way, you can see my cursor, right? Hopefully this is actually shared.
Yes, I can see it.
Cool. Yeah, so the first derivation thing, it's fairly simple, right? So like a derivation in Nix is like a definition of a build, takes some inputs and produces an output. So like it should be pretty much always like this. So the inputs almost always are just provided using like the source attribute, and the outputs are almost always provided in some kind of a, like they get built and then the build outputs get pushed and put in store, and then they're like put in that specific path. And then usually as a result, you get this symlink to that build location. So like you can like inspect it and use it as you need. So basic example, like would be like, say if we start with a source and then we just have like a text file in there, like so like this hello that's like put into the source directory, then we can write a Nix derivation, which like we'll just call it like default.nix or something, right? So this is like the default files that are picked up to be used. So first we just kind of declare like, okay, Nix packages, like it can be overridden, but we'll just use this import Nix packages channel value. And then from there, we'll use the standard environment Nix packages function make derivation. And to make derivation, we just really have to provide a few things like what the name of our derivation is going to be, what sources it should actually draw from, like basically like what files it should look for to copy into the store to work with them. And then it's going to have this thing called the install phase that's like a common thing in like most derivations of what kind of operations do we actually want to happen, so that this out variable path will be like written to, and then that the result of writing to that path will then be copied over to our store. And then, yeah, when we build this, we just call Nix build, right? So Nix build by default, it's basically implicitly using the default.nix. And then when you run this, the first time you run it, or like when the derivation needs to be built based on the inputs, it'll give you a bunch of like build logs, but then in the end, you'll get a location in your store that you can actually like inspect. And you'll also have a symlink called result in here. So, you know, once you run Nix build, then you can say, okay, read link and tell me where this link goes. And then you can also look at like, how do I say, yeah, like you can hard follow that link. So this is kind of a confusing example, I admit, but the first read link is just reading the symlink of like the first level, but then that is also a symlink to something else. So then if you hard read the symlink, then it's like, yeah, it's just a symlink of the source, right? I'll just go back for a second so we can look at it. Our install phase was like do a symlink of our source to our output. So that means that the output is going to be itself a symlink. So yeah, it makes sense that when we follow it all the way through, it just goes to the source that's been copied over to the store. And then, yeah, you can like just like look at the contents of the result, and it's just going to be the directory where it has the hi.txt in there. So next is that the next article I wrote was how to work with the Nix shells. So quite commonly Nix shells, you provide just a package name with -p. So this is just going to use like whatever stuff is in your channel generally. So then if you have like Nixpkgs, like stuff in Nixpkgs, then like say like if you do like -p hello, this is actually a package that has like this hello program in it. So then when you start a Nix shell with the hello, then like you can say like which hello, and like you get like the path of the binary that's like in Nix shell's path. And then like when you call it, then like you get like this hello world. And then yeah, you can exit out from the Nix shell to go back to your top level shell. So like commonly, if you want to be able to work with these shells in any kind of like non-trivial way, so like without like the -p, so you want to be able to define your own shell, you want to like specify multiple packages from like different places that you want to put in here, then you can use like this make shell function in Nixpkgs. So typically then you'll create a Nix shell.nix file that says like, okay, packages make shell, and then like my build inputs that go in here are going to be like package.hello and whatever other stuff. So then, yeah, you can use this again, where if you do Nix shell, then implicitly it will use the shell.nix or use default.nix. But then, yeah, you can do like --run. So then it just runs this command and exits out. So when I do this, then the Nix shell is created with the hello in the environment, and then you can do which hello and call it, and it does what you expect. So third thing I wrote about was like this pinning to Nix packages. So I didn't quite understand that, like, not that many people will just straight up tell you how to do this, even though it seems like fairly simple. And I guess that's probably some of the reason why people didn't want to write this in user guides for some reason, that like they all think that this is too trivial. But I thought, like, well, this is something I need, and then people talk about this all the time, and then there's like a different ways that people do this, but the general idea is still the same. So then I actually like sat down and wrote an article about this. So pinning Nix packages just means like you're pinning a specific derivation or specific expression rather for the Nix packages. So instead of just bringing Nix packages in from the channel and whatever, then you can just like actually explicitly declare like, oh, which like commit or what tarball or whatever else you want to use. So like in this example, it's like I imported from by doing the fetch tarball. So I'm fetching the tarball from GitHub, and this is like a, it's like a GitHub specific thing that they have tarballs made of each commit. But then by using that and declaring what the result SHA should be, then like you can just declaratively use this pinned Nix packages. And then, yeah, so using it is, like I said, it's the same thing as like importing Nix packages, but like you're basically just replacing that part. So then instead of having to deal with whatever's in the Nix packages channel, and like that will depend based on like when someone installed Nix, when they updated their channels, and what platform they're using might have a different installer, and yada yada yada. You can all make them all use the same thing, so you don't have to worry about like the API of Nix packages changing or whatever. So the follow-up, I guess, would be that you can use fetch from GitHub instead. So instead of like using tarball URL directly, you can just use like this revision SHA, and then get like the content SHA also, and just be able to declare just like, oh, it's from NixOS, Nix packages. And then if you need to, then like if your company forks Nix packages and changes stuff in there, then you just change the owner, change rev, change the SHA, and then like you're pretty much ready to go. One thing I would, I guess, say is that while fetch tarball is like a very common operation, so it's like built-in, but then fetch from GitHub, at least for now, isn't built in, and arguably it shouldn't be because it's like a specific vendor thing. But yeah, this is why in here I'm basically saying that I'm relying on the system to have the Nix packages channel, and if it doesn't, then yeah, it will blow up. So I might need to specify some kind of alternatives or whatever, or have people call this with different arguments, but that's like besides the point. Most people with Nix will be able to use this derivation, at least to bootstrap, or it's not really bootstrap, but it's like to be able to, you can use like the minimal dependencies that you have to create a larger, more reliable environment. Yeah, and then the install Nix profile. So this is like the fourth article I wrote. I realized that people want to be able to install tooling from Nix, because it's like a core thing about Nix that's nice, that you can actually guarantee to a reasonable extent, you can guarantee that you're going to have like the same version, same configuration of like various tooling, right? So then becomes pretty important to be able to install things from the Nix profile. So then I wrote this article where I just pointed out basically that the Nix profile directory that's in your home directory is a symlink. So then just like looking at the properties of this, we can see like, say it has like this FHS style directory pattern. So it's like the similar directory pattern, similar organization to the files that you have in your Linux root file system and whatever. And importantly, we can see that the hard link that this file, or not hard link, but like the followed link rather, we can see that it's a store path. So from this, we can kind of guess like, oh, like Nix profile basically itself is a derivation. So every time the inputs of that changes, then we get a new derivation. But then from that, we know that like we can just work with it as a derivation and like be able to install stuff to it as needed. So the main thing I guess a lot of people want to be able to do is they don't really need to specify the most specific thing. They just need to install a version of this tool that they can be reasonably sure works. So then in this case, like you would do like nixenv install from the attribute for a nixpkgs.python, and this will install some version of Python. This is probably old, admittedly, like probably people don't use this version anymore, but yeah. Once you install it, then like your profile gets updated. And then once you do like which Python, then like, you know, you'll get like this path that points to your Nix profile path. And then you can even follow that to like the actual store location where this is being stored to. And uninstalling, I realized that like a lot of times you need to uninstall not because you don't want something, but because it conflicts with something else. Then like I put this in here that -E is the shorthand for uninstall, and then it basically uses regex matching to figure out what to delete. And yeah, like I also realized that like you need to be able to check what's in the environment, right? You need to be able to say, I mean, if you install stuff and delete stuff and whatever, it's like at some point you still just to get like a actual like rundown of or summary of like what all you have installed. So then like -Q, I realized that like not like it's kind of hard to find that you're supposed to do this. It's like it's sort of query, and it's like I don't know. I didn't find it to be the most obvious thing, so I made sure to include this in the article. So second to last one, right? I believe. So installing packages from files is basically the follow-up to this previous one, but not necessarily like it's not like you have to know the previous to work with this. This is more of a thing that comes up in like, say, if you want to create a derivation to use throughout your system, or you want to create a derivation that you use within a project, then you need to be able to define and like keep track of packages from like files, right? So working from a single derivation expression file means that you can like, build, install, whatever you need to do with it. So here, this example, it's not like a program, but like say it might be a dependency in the environment that we're working in. So then here I can say like, just define Nix packages and then use the make derivation to make sure that I had this test.txt in here. And then this is probably like quite optional, but like I decided to use the derivation make derivation API just to say like, oh, I only want to run like this one thing, and then this creates a directory and then copies symlinks files in there. And so from that, I believe I have this example. Yeah. So then when you do Nix build derivation, it's going to just do the same like derivation building that we saw from the first derivation example. And like that, hello, I am a test. And then if you use the Nix environment command to do the install from file, then we can install from the derivation file and put that into our Nix profile, which then like, yeah, once that environment is built, then it tells you like where this is, what the symlink was, whatnot. And then you can actually look at this. So Nix profile /test and then /text, you can actually read that file. So say if you have like configurations that you're using and you need to like make sure that they're available in some location, then like you can always like point at like the newest version that you want to look at by using this this path, instead of trying to like fiddle around with like the latest hard-coded paths and whatnot, like having to so you don't have to build derivation for everything that's like involves a configuration input, right? You can just use this. Okay, and then oh yeah. So and you can also use like a set of derivations. So if you use like an attribute set, which is basically it's basically a hash map, right? You can define a whole bunch of things that you want to use, and then you can install whatever files in this way. And I personally use this quite a lot just to manage like programs that I use on my computer. Maybe I'll come back to this. Like if someone reminds me, like if someone reminds me to look at my DAW files for like how I install programs that I use, then I'll be able to show you on GitHub. Yeah. So nixenv if, and then you'll get these things in your environment. So the last one then was just how to work with the REPL, and it doesn't go into too much detail, but just says here it is, and here's like how you can inspect some of the values. So then yeah, when you open the Nix REPL, then you have this question mark, which can tell you like what kind of commands you have access to and what you could do with these things. Most interestingly would just be like, say like build derivation and install, right? So like if you want to build something, make sure it works, and then like you want to install it into your environment, into your profile, just like test it out, then like you can do that with the REPL. So then just a example, like you can evaluate the whatever expressions and get like the result, right? So evaluation, just like it's about like the same thing as like whatever you would write in a file. The only caveat would just be like the spine. It acts like you're let binding things in the scope, but it has like the specific syntax that's like used in the REPL. But then by working with this, then we can just like say, we can open up Nix REPL with Nixpkgs or whatever your pin packages, whatnot in bash. And then once it loads up to REPL, then like here we can inspect things. So like you can do like packages dot and tab over and have it like spit out like what all matches there are and whatnot. And we can even look at like, say, what the output path of building this derivation would be. And so then before you build it, that path won't exist. It won't take up space or anything, but then you can just build it here. And then in a separate tab, you can like go look at the content, or like when you exit out of the Nix REPL, then like you'll see like, okay, this has been built, and then all the files and whatever are here. And actually that's basically it for Nix Shorts. So we spent about 20 minutes on that. So I think that's okay pacing. So that's like the most like concrete part of this talk, right? That's like the very short introduction to Nix. I have like Nix Shorts articles on GitHub if you want to review them. But yeah, so from here I'll just go into like kind of philosophical things of like, or as Joe likes to say, it's basically a meta narrative, right? It's a narrative of narratives. So why did I write this Nix Shorts, right? So there's a lot of things I didn't like about introduction to Nix materials, and especially because like I couldn't learn from them. I couldn't read them and then actually be able to refer to them to know things. So like those are like two things. And then third is like, if like anyone I knew or like my coworkers asked me a question, I couldn't actually like point to anything that I thought was like reliably fast to actually like understand, and like actually got like yeah, so like it didn't get to the point and had a bunch of other things that I didn't like about them. So the number one thing I guess I would say is like there were a lot of irrelevant Nix implementation details that a lot of introduction to Nix talks would do. So it's like, how do you create a derivation from scratch using this derivation keyword? It's like very rarely in normal use in Nix, and especially as a beginner, you're basically never using this keyword. So I thought like, okay, all these introduction talks that tries to do this are basically just like someone trying to show off or someone talking about something that doesn't really involve like actual like usage from beginners. Another thing would be like Nix instantiate. So like Nix instantiate is quite useful for working with expressions and whatever, but it's also just not really something that beginners need, because this is like you use instantiate when you're already like quite deep into using it, and then you're trying to like debug things or trying to see what the result of some kind of action would be. So I thought like, okay, this is also not very useful. And yeah, the other things I would say are like GC roots and like other implementation details, whatnot, or also things that I felt like they didn't help you as a new user actually like understand how to like get things done. In rather, they're kind of like things that are somewhat they're basically trivia or things that kind of help you troubleshoot some things, but things that aren't really like actually like useful for your like they're not useful for your first 2 days of using Nix. I could put it that way. So I would say that like a lot of introduction to Nix articles are basically the same thing as Haskell introductions that try to go with GC generics, template Haskell, or like I guess some other examples would be like, let's learn how to write Haskell, and then here's how you install Servant to set up type level routes and whatever. It's just like, this isn't like the level where people need to begin. And it's not necessarily even things that everybody uses all the time, right? I mean, I personally really like GHC generics, but I'm not going to use it in a Hello World project. The second biggest thing I would say is this lack of Nixpkgs standard lib, standard env/lib usage. It's just like it's kind of like teaching Haskell without using the Prelude library, right? So it's like a lot of introduction to Nix articles are obsessed with reinvented the wheel and like building things from first principles, and it mostly ends up being quite like quite confusing, because it's like, okay, like these standard tools are the things that everybody else uses. I'm not going to like reinvent these every time I use Nix. So it's like, just these examples end up being just not very like useful, right? Like like oh, there's just too many things to say about this, but yeah, generally I would just say that like 99% of code that you look at that's written in Nix is going to be using the Nixpkgs standard library stuff. So not telling people how things work in there, or not showing people examples that use this, are just going to be like extra confusing. And yeah, like one of my biggest pet peeves about introduction to Nix is people try to tell you how to write custom builders. So like the thing that handles the install phases and whatever in Meg derivation, that's like the part that people want you to learn how to rewrite when you learn how to use Nix. And it's just kind of it's just, I don't know. Yeah, it's basically like learning how to reinvent the universe when you want to learn how to make an apple pie. The one of the main other things that I would say are just really like quite annoying, following from that would be that, yeah, demonstration examples don't really exist. So like I said, I want to be able to like look at code and have code explain to me that like is what I'm going to actually be running into in the real world, and like when I'm actually like using Nix in my own projects. So not showing me that and showing me something written from scratch, just mostly like distracts from like what my initial objectives are. And yeah, as a follow-up, like not learning like say how like the call package works, how like the arguments to expressions work, or like even learning how all files, all Nix source files are basically all expressions. They're not just statements. That was also something like I found like was very confusing when I was like trying to learn how to use Nix. One of the most common things that people also tell you when you're trying to learn how to use Nix is like just read Nixpkgs. And the problem with this is that Nixpkgs is it's introduction to Nix philosophy rather than introduction to how to use Nix. And the actual quote from Nixpkgs is, "These articles are not a tutorial on using Nix. Instead, we're going to walk through the Nix system to understand the fundamentals." Right. So yeah, just this thing you see quite often whenever people are asking like, "Hey, I'm a beginner, how do I actually use this?" Or, "Hey, I'm a beginner, I'm trying to like understand how to like create the derivations." And this answer just ends up being like very unhelpful. So in response to these problems that I complained about a lot, and like I would just run into, and like if a coworker of mine asked me something, I would kind of like just sigh and say like, "Okay, sorry, let me type out an explanation for you, because this link I can show you, it goes through like all kinds of like other stuff that doesn't matter. So here's like like 1 or 2 paragraphs explaining like how to do the thing you're asking me about." I got tired of doing that over and over. So then I did the worst thing that you can do for a given problem is, and that is like, I took matters into my own hands to actually do something, right? So like, yeah, these like 4 things, for example, it's like, what do people I know ask me over and over? What do people I work with not know? So like, what are they asking about? What are they asking about that they don't know the like building blocks for how to work with? And like, what are like the most basic end goal things, or like main objectives that they want to like achieve that they're not able to achieve because like it's a lack of understanding, or lack of like lack of knowledge, lack of how do you say, it's like they don't know enough about like what tools exist in order to solve a problem. So it's a lot of times I felt like basically I'm trying to teach people how to or people are asking me how to hammer in nails, but like they don't know what the hammer is called in Nix. So and in response to that, I wrote the Nix short stuff. So
Justin, we have a question.
yes.
Julio, would you like to unmute and ask your question? Julio, are you there?
Maybe he has tech problems.
Could be. Not everybody is always able to unmute. Audio is not working. Okay. Yeah, I can ask. So Julio wonders, I'm not sure exactly what this means. Maybe it means something to you. Could we have a Nix shorts on overlays or package overrides?
Oh, I mean, so basically just like introduction to Nix's most confusing features. Yeah, I thought about it, but I don't think I'm the right person to write that yet. And I personally just I avoid a lot of things that I find like not easy to debug. So yeah, I don't know. I hope someone will write one at some point, but yeah, not me as of yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so what I wrote my Nix shorts, or I began writing my Nix shorts, right? So I mostly started thinking about this in like during like Johannes here. So that's like the midsummer here. It's like, it's a time when people basically sit on their ass and do nothing during June. So I like thought about this and I said, okay, I've been answering like a bunch of like random questions for like half a year now. How do I like like make something that's like immediately useful and like something that I could also refer to back myself? Because like sometimes I just use my Nix tools and whatever that I've written for like maybe even like a year and I never revisit it. And then it's like, then at some point I just suddenly go, okay, I know this is something I need to do, but like, how do I do it? And like, I can't remember and there's nothing succinct for that. So then these are, so I'll just introduce some of the topics as we go. Some of the main things that I want to talk about. And yeah, and these are things that are not even necessarily how do I say, they're not specific to Nix Shorts. They're kind of like a general thing that I've done with all my writing. So Nix Shorts is say 6 articles, and then my blog posts overall I have like 113 of them. So they're these general ideas of what I try to do don't only apply to my Nix Shorts, but like they apply to like my writing in general. And they've definitely influenced like some of the things where like I've like things that I wrote even before Nix Shorts, I thought about these things. The two small points, or the like maybe they're kind of like the most important ones, but the two like easiest points to talk about is just like I want to write about a single topic per article, and I want to have a specific like kind of like a general definition of that topic. So if topic doesn't, it's just like doesn't mean anything grandiose, just means like one like actual problem that I run into. And it should be fairly independent to consume, right? So I don't want to write a bunch of like chain things that like build on each other, even though in some ways like some media, some ideas, some things probably have to be consumed that kind of way. At least for my purposes, it's like I kind of assume that there's already some kind of knowledge, or like you're going to review it later. I'll talk more about this in a bit, but yeah, just the idea that everything is basically a unit. You can choose to consume it or not. Yeah, and the definition is just what is topic, right? So doesn't mean anything too fancy. It's just if I say that if a blog post is how to get rid of mosquitoes, then the definition would just be how do I actually like get rid of mosquitoes? You know, what kind of methods are there to rid myself of them or prevent them from causing me problems? So demonstrations would be one of the big things that I attempt to do. I think I just complain about it some, but yeah, demonstrations with commands and code, right? So code should have actual like explanations inside. In the slideshow, admittedly, I didn't have enough of the descriptions, but if you go back to my Nix Shorts or like some of my blog posts, you'll see like how like I kind of like to do this kind of thing. But the code should have like explanation of like the intention, right? What kind of things you're putting in there and what the expected and actual output should be. So like expected output is just, you know, like, okay, I did this thing, this should follow from this. And then the actual output is just like, oh, here's basically an excerpt of the console output, or like the actual output or whatever thing that like I did is. So this is basically it's more useful than like me just vaguely talking about something. So well, basically I could say the same thing about what I'm saying now, right? Like my description, my presentation is only like a vague description of like some of the concrete things that I would want to do. And most importantly, I think a lot of people are able to do pattern recognition. I'm pretty sure that's like a fairly human trait. And I don't mean pattern recognition in some kind of fancy way. I just mean that like stove is hot, hand on stove is hurt. Like I just mean that. Like and I think once you lay out the code and provide some actual explanations of what kind of intent you have and what the expected output is, people can form their own connections and like they can understand in their own way, reinterpret it, and that this process helps them keep something in memory, learn something, and then be able to apply it later. And yeah, what the third important thing I would say is that when you make code examples where you explain like the intent and whatever, then it actually becomes reproducible, not just in the sense of I can copy paste this code, but the method in which I've written this code and like the expectations of the inputs and outputs, if something changes, like APIs change, or like the system changes, or like you change, say I'm learning pure script things and I refer to something written in Haskell about it, if it's well enough explained and I've been able to make my own connections about it, then I'm going to be able to just port things over, remap some of the inputs, and get like that, like similar output, or like some of the output what I want. The common the common complaints that people have that then will be like, the examples will go out of date, and like I said, it's like, okay, did you actually explain how like the input works, or like what you intend with the input, and like what kind of thing comes out of the result? I think if yes, the users can usually, people are smart enough that if they've figured out like how this kind of connections work, they can read through the change logs, map the interfaces, and then just piece by piece actually figure out how to use the new thing. But if no, then I think it's like, I'm not saying that like you shouldn't publish something that doesn't meet this criteria, but like if this is something that you complain about, then I hope that you will just like consider like doing some more work to make this not such a problem in the future. And yeah, the most basic or reductionist argument, I guess, will be that like, yeah, the topic will go out of date. And it's like, yes, all topics will go out of date, and literally everything with that we're doing at computers won't matter in the heat death of the universe, but we're here writing about things using computers and whatever anyways. So I don't think that people should just say topic will go out of date. I think people should put some effort into like just writing about the topic if it's going to be useful either for themselves or for other people. And maybe as a continuation of that, explanation of familiar bits, I think is quite important. And in that unfamiliar items should be explained, right? Like however you can. So what does this mean? Like it just means things like, if I write an article that's about like how to make something like implicitly type correctly or whatever, right? So like, say if I have something that's like a type directed JSON decoding, then like I should be able to just say in the beginning, okay, this is what I mean by concrete type definition, in that I have like a definition that I have like a type that I've written like completely by hand, that like this value should have in the end, and that. So, just that kind of thing, that like terms that people might not be familiar with, they should have like a somewhat of a explanation of how they work. So if the explanation is not really sufficient, right, then hopefully you're able to make it so that people can further investigate this. So like shared vocabulary and whatever. And this point is basically similar, that like you should have like clear demonstrations or demonstration explanations of ideas on top of the methods, right? And this is, but like, yeah, this is more about like prerequisite knowledge kind of thing. I would say about the explanations of things, that like something I really don't want to do, or like really, I really want to avoid as much as possible, is I don't want to treat regions like children, right? So when I do an explanation, I don't want to use a lot of like weird analogies that like never map. The analogy should basically be like very briefly used, and then you should come back and actually do a real explanation. So like the worst example, or one of the worst examples I think is like the burrito for monad, whatever. It's like people try to just force this analogy through constantly, and it's just like, yeah, it's not helpful. Yeah, and one of the most common pushback things is going to be like, it's impossible to talk about these things because they get infinitely, endlessly complex, right? Like people try to say like, oh, you can't talk about why you might not use list in some situation because then you need to talk about like how lists are constructed and what kind of list it is, and it depends if it's a linked list and depends on like what the layout was in memory and how it's interpreted in the computer system, and that's all determined by the silicon and blah blah blah. It's like I don't know if people have ever like have realized that when they say this, it's they're kind of just refuting everything that like that they've done with everything else. So like, what's the difference in a pop science article that you might read about like about biology, or in this case COVID, an undergrad biology book that might talk about some of the most common mechanisms and whatever, and then a microbiology textbook might talk about specifically what kind of vector technologies you use, how like what kind of techniques you use to introduce gene segments and whatever, or sequences into certain bacteria to produce and blah blah, blah, right? And I had like a example I was going to say about this, but it really escapes me now. But I'll probably come back to this later when it pops back in my mind. But yeah, further about this on the next slide is that you should have links to other resources whenever you write things. So like, this is something I really try to do. I'm quite lazy about this actually. So it's not like a consistent thing, but I try to make sure that like there's always like 2 or 3 external links. If it's not entirely self-contained and it has some unfamiliar parts, I really try to make sure that there's like external links so that like people can read a more elaborated explanation of something, or even I can just read a more elaborate explanation. I can read some of my related writing or some other related articles and whatever. So the idea being that like, I don't really need to explain everything self-contained in the article if it is actually too big of a scope. So yeah, how can I send people somewhere where they have like some idea of what they're looking for, and how can they like learn more about this? And I think one of the most important things to be able to accomplish this is that you don't create this kind of closed ecosystem where you have all the answers. Like you need to, I think you end up needing to phrase things in a way where it's not a closed ecosystem and you can actually look outside for answers. And how do I say it? The most concrete thing I would say is, if you're trying to talk about something that's like a functional programming concept, you need to use vocabulary in consistent ways that then you can link to other literature, other previous things that are written, so that people can learn about it. So if you try to yourself arbitrarily reading everything, then people can't even map the same concepts to things. So then what ends up happening is that people have learned your weird alias system for how to describe things, and when they go over to read anything else, it's like they either need to like start from scratch because they realize like none of these terms make sense, or they need to like go one by one and try to build mapping between like the weird specialized terminology or like alias terminology and the actual terminology. So yeah, this links to other resources. It's also not only just about external resources, but like making sure that like the way that things are described are consistent, so that other people that when like other people read things, or like when I read things and I go somewhere else, then I can use like my existing knowledge to then fill in the gaps and elaborate things as needed. Important also is actually, it sounds really stupid, but it has to actually be able to not read, right? this sounds weird, but I think this is like the difference between people want to like think about uh things being like a narrative flow or like some kind of story or kind of building blocks and whatever. And I think like the problem is that this basically creates like a long article that's like too vague, too large in scope, and like it's over embellished. It's like each explanation is like way too long and way too vague. Well, kind of like my presentation now, but um my hope is that whenever I write something, I like, even when I'm coming back to it, I don't really need to read every line. I can just like read the subjects, look at the parts I'm interested in, read the code segments, read the explanation, and then if that doesn't make sense, I then go back up to look at the preceding segments to see if there's enough context I can read, then to come back to the thing to actually figure it out. So it's like it's kind of like this manual mindset instead of like a book. So, you know, books are nice, but I don't necessarily want things to be a book. And I think I'm pretty sure this is my last point, but I try not to do moral messaging in my articles. So I try to not say like, this is what you've been doing wrong like the whole time, or this is an anti-pattern or blah blah. I just try to say like, okay, here's like how you do something, and as far as I can tell, like here's how you might like approach some kind of problem, and here's like the things you might do with it. So like I made this stupid meme image, right? Like I think now I made this like 4 years ago or something. And it's like this yeah, it's basically a guy on a bike doing a self-own with like a bunch of like very non, how do I say, basically just a bunch of like very vague types, right? So it's things that don't actually give you information for context of like how something works. But this is just, it's a meme. It's stupid. It you shouldn't take it completely seriously, and like it's kind of like it's kind of ridiculing. It's ridiculing to some anonymous person who is consistently um insists on doing something that harms themselves. So because it's a joke and it's stupid, like I really don't want this ever to be instant documentation. I know that some people have put it in there, and as a response, what I've done is I've actually deleted the original tweet that this is in, and I've actually privated my Twitter memes GitHub repo, because I really just never want people to use this in that kind of context. And like too many times people were trying to do that. But yeah, the things that I expect from other articles, basically, these are all the titles I just introduced, right? And these are the things that I want the other articles to do. And like really, like even like half of these would be good to have, right? Because I find that too many times, like they have like none of these points. And it's mostly just comes down to like a difference in like perspective, or maybe like lack of exposure to that kind of to those kinds of opinions. But yeah, just like these are, to me, like the things that I want to see from articles. uh what what I mean, that's actually pretty much it for like the content here. I've been almost going at this for an hour, but yeah, basically this is what I would say like writings I dislike do, right? So if I want to go on the offensive without like naming names or something, I would say like, okay, long readme with no structure, that's something I really dislike. It shows like that people are trying to create this thing that's like not at all organized, or maybe it's trying to like create this narrative flow that like it's supposed to be read from start to finish, but there's just no organization. So I personally find it to be very frustrating to deal with like long readmes. And I think when people talk about like using tooling to generate structure for readmes, that's just like yeah. Anyway, next thing I could say is that to-dos. I think to-dos are not very nice in articles or documentation because it's like you're acknowledging already when you create a to-do section that there is something that needs to be said about this thing, but you couldn't spare even a single minute to like elaborate in any kind of way. So I think even if you want to do to-do, I think you at least need like a definition or like a problem statement in there, and then just say like, okay, please ask me the first time, and then I can elaborate on this further. Yeah. Like I mentioned before, analogy stretch too far. So burritos and Lego also like are quite offensive to me. Are I find that they usually are only gratifying for the writer and doesn't actually help readers understand anything. And yeah, it's last on here, but it's one of the most important things to me. Is I don't like lies and misrepresentations. They will happen from everyone. I don't think anyone's perfect about this, but generally I don't want people to say things about other things, other tools, other articles that aren't like at all trying to represent like truth. Like, so if someone knows that something is actually 100% not the truth, then I think it's very, I think it's like unforgivable when people like purposely write something like this. And yeah, I could talk about some examples of this, but I won't name names. But yeah, just this is something that constantly comes up. But hopefully we can do better than this as people who are trying to be nice to each other. Yeah, actually, but I do have some hope for like articles in the future, right? So I think people kind of already, I think there's already kind of a movement where people are incorporating a lot of these ideas, and like even in the Nix space, I would say that like I think like say Nix.dev has changed quite a lot recently, so that it's quite problem oriented and it's like quite independent. So it's not even like say like in Nix, it's like everything is a bit everything is like weird and confusing, blah blah blah. It's like people in general are moving towards this kind of thing anyway, and but it's also that like everyone should write for their own like what they want to refer to and whatever, and they don't need to follow like everything I say, but like I'm saying, this is basically like a TED talk where like I'm basically explaining things that people already agree with, and then they'll just nod and then kind of remember more about this whenever they write articles of their own. But yeah, I think the pushback that people have a lot about writing is just, I'm bad at writing, I don't want to maintain it, I'm too lazy, I don't know enough about it. And it's like, yeah, but like these are all things that like aren't actually a problem. Like I'm bad at writing is like, everybody is bad at writing in different ways, so it's not really a thing. I don't want to maintain it. Is like I said, it's like if you make enough effort to make it so that it's you explain intent and expected outcome, then it's not really that big of a problem. I'm too lazy. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think lazy is the wrong word for this. So yeah, I don't know enough about it. It's kind of like it's somewhat fair, but it's also like if it's something that you can write about at least to help yourself, then I think you really should try to take some effort to write it. And I mean, like, you don't have to publish it, of course. You can just write it in your own notebook, but it's something that you should try to do. Um, Also, Pavel says that easy for a native speaker to say. I would say you should write in any mixture of languages you want. So there's I if anyone follows my Twitter nowadays, they'll see that like I write a lot of these inane fake Chinese, fake Japanese tweets, and they're mostly just notes that I write to amuse myself, but also to remind myself of when I was thinking some kind of things. So, they don't have to, you don't have to make it so that English speakers can read it. They can definitely just be for self gratification. But yeah, Some of the reasons why you might not write, yeah, it's like I'm too lazy, but lazy is the wrong word, I think. I think it's more like I'm not motivated to, and it's kind of like it's a mixture of like, or how much are you not motivated or stuff like that. It's really hard to describe, but yeah, I would also say like I personally also deal with motivation as a problem. Um, like I said before, I think I wrote around 60 articles in 2018. I wrote about 30 or 25 articles in 2019, and I wrote only like 6 in the last year. So definitely like I also deal with my own motivation, but it's also kind of like I've been like more busy doing like other stuff. So I'm mostly, because I've mostly written articles for myself to consume, I kind of just haven't like really written anything new because I'm not really trying to consume new things necessarily. But yeah, this is like quite hazy. It's like it's quite valid, but it's also like hopefully everyone can figure out some different things to motivate themselves and go on further. So this is my lead up. This is the most horrible lead up to you should write, right? This is the most horrible lead up to like call to action. But yeah, the call to action is basically just please write, because you should reinforce what you know and write mostly for yourself. I think you shouldn't try to make it all about like a altruistic thing, because altruism is like um how do I say, when it comes to something as painful as technical writing, it's not enough of a motivating factor in most of the time. So I think you should write whenever there's like a like benefit that you can gain from it. Either you help yourself in the future, or you help like people you know and people who ask you questions that you want to help and whatnot. Yeah, and yeah, this is basically a repetition of the previous one, but you are reviewing what you know, what you're writing about. It doesn't even have to be right. It just has to be that, is this consistent right now with my understanding of things? And if it's wrong, then I'll just have to fix it at some point, or I'll just ignore it. But at least it's consistent with what I believe now. You can help other people learn. This really can be just a secondary objective, and I think this is kind of the true secondary objective whenever you write, is that you want other people who maybe don't agree with you to gain some perspective, to be able to say, okay, I have to review what I've been saying to actually like rephrase things. So like say if I went back to like things that I don't like about other articles, like say like the oh man, there's so many of those. But I guess the main thing is like the demonstration code examples. Like I really want people to gain some perspective that like, oh, explaining this code block or like this technique in this way can be actually like useful for other people to interpret things in new ways. And that's really what I'm like when I'm after. Whenever like someone who already knows this subject reads something I read about, I just want them to be able to get a different perspective, to be able to help other people help themselves, like write in different ways. And yeah, also help me by telling me what they think is different and whatnot. But yeah, thanks for coming to my talk and listening to my rambling. The next words are here in this GitHub repo. This is probably near one of my top starred repos now. It has like 219 now or whatever. And these slides, I'll make them public soon on GitHub whenever I get around to it. And yeah, also just a bonus here, some random food pictures you can look at if you're bored. But yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Justin. So I think we'll have a few questions. First of all, Philip has a question and I need to ask it. Nix this is a long question, so prepare yourself. Nix has very big conceptual differences to other build tools and package managers. For example, if I would come from another package manager, I would initially look for how do I install XY, But with Nix, you would create an environment with a shell and share the shell.nix. In their current form, the shorts do not address this. How do you address this when teaching Nix? More generally, how do you address caveats?
I'm not. I have to like get these questions elaborated. Maybe the first one would just be that like I am installing X and Y into my environment, right? And this is something that like some people like religiously believe against, but I think in like practical ways, it's like it's very good to write to your global environment in your Nix profile. But in its current form, Nix shorts don't address using Nix shell. I don't quite understand because it's like I do talk about like using Nix shell and like writing expressions, but like it. I think there's a couple different ways that this could go, but yeah, I think it's like it's actually fine for me to write to the environment. So I guess that's like the one thing that like already I fundamentally disagree with somehow that this question wouldn't like, and yeah, like I don't know. I think I think the Nix Shorts shell example kind of already gives you some way to start with it. And then whenever I'm like working with my coworkers and like they read through this like thing, then like our project already has the Nix shell. So like, they can already work from there about like how to do things. But yeah. And then I mean like some of my coworkers use OS X, some of my coworkers use normal Linux, some of my coworkers use NixOS. So then whatever they read from the various things are kind of relevant. So like if someone wants to install Emacs on their profile, then they will install it either from the package on Nixpkgs, or they'll install it from a derivation that they either craft or copy paste or something. So I don't know. I think there's just too many different ways of doing this. And yeah, I think addressing caveats is just like, I don't know. I mostly just write only to the happy path, and I say like, okay, you might run into this thing, but I do not really try to cover them too much. Nix Dev, I think, is quite good about trying to do that kind of stuff. But yeah, should I answer Nicholas' question about?
Well, I was hoping Nicholas would unmute to ask the question. Nicholas, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, I don't know if it works.
Yes, it's working.
Yeah.
So, hi, Justin. So the question was, where's the best venue to write? Because it's something to write and it's another thing to be read.
Yeah.
And so, I was just throwing that idea. GitHub. GitHub is something that everybody uses. Is it the new place to write?
I would say that like because I'm writing for mostly selfish reasons, and I'm writing also to be able to link people to something, I use GitHub just because it's like the easiest, right? Where like the markdown stuff works and the code blocks work and whatever, right? And I'm writing mostly for my own consumption, so I use GitHub because it's like easiest organization. But I don't know. I feel like this actually depends on like the person, right? Because if you want to write so that you can read it and you're writing about like you like want to reach an audience or whatever term you want to use. I think like a lot of people used to use Medium and now they use like Ghost and whatever. So I don't think I have an answer for this. I think it's just too subjective.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you still write for that that Japanese site?
I do, and I upload some of our writing on there.
Kita,
but
that's right, Kita.
Yeah. I would say that there's some drama about that site though. Like a lot of Japanese people stopped using it because they got tired of like basically a lot of people got tired of marketing style posts on Kita. So there's a lot of drama about that.
What about dev.to? How do you feel about that site?
I personally don't like that site.
Why?
But I think it's other people have different needs, right? I think it's mostly I feel like dev.to is mostly a marketing site. So it's like if you want the right to be read and then you want some like following, I think it's good. But if you're writing just as like for yourself and to explain things to like people, specific people, then like I don't know if it's necessarily that good.
But when it's not working, you can draw pictures in the browser.
Is that how it works?
Yeah, if your internet connection fails and you're connected to dev.to, it will let you draw pictures.
Nice.
It's got like a little paint tool. Okay, more real questions are rolling in. I don't have a real question.
Limits of markdown for longer writing.
Wait a minute. Let's do them in order, Justin. So Andre has a question, and of course this is being recorded, so we have to give Andre a chance to unmute to ask.
Okay, I can go. First of all, thank you for your presentation, and also we've met in person in Tokyo. So I'm not sure if you remember me or not. So we met one year, and then the next year you couldn't come.
Yeah, sorry, I was sick that year. I was like just in bed for a while.
So my question is, with the amount of things that need to be explained, is there a way for things to sort of like bounce back and change the Nix itself to be more beginner friendly?
That is, there's a lot of politics in Nix, so I don't know. There's always been like there's always changes being made to Nix itself, so maybe, but like I don't think I have enough capital or like the willpower to change it, but yeah.
So maybe through the blog posts, it can find its way to the people who like work and manage Nix.
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, at least some of the things I've said, and I met some of the Nix developers to talk about this kind of stuff with them. But yeah, there's quite a lot of things. I mean, it's also not like the easiest tool, so it's quite hard to like just say that like I want to change this, because yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't have a good answer to this.
Does Nix actually make your development workflow better, or is it simply fun to use for people who like to tinker with things?
Me personally, I use it because it's reliable, and I use it also to set up my CI at work. So without Nix, I have no real reliable way to install packages, and reproducing things on CI becomes a nightmare. So I used to use like Travis, like a lot of projects do, but I mean, this is also like 2019 was like around the time when like Travis started like imploding as a company in products. So yeah, I use Nix because it actually helps me make things work. But I think people who have spent enough time with Docker might say that they like Docker for various things, but yeah, I don't know. I personally think Nix is much easier to use than Docker.
Interesting. Okay, Marcus has a question. Marcus, would you like to unmute?
If this works. Hello, thanks for the draw.
Hello.
So you use Markdown for your writing, and it obviously works for those shorts. But what do you choose for longer writings, more involved writings? If you need tables and stuff, still want to integrate code examples and stuff. Would you go for LaTeX, or would you use Sphinx? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I've used like Sphinx before, right? And like the oh god, what is it called? Read the docs is like the most common Sphinx deployment, right? And like I've used that before, but yeah, I don't really know like if I have like any good answers for that. But yeah, I personally like the Nix Schwartz is basically just directory of markdown files, so I like that, but I'm mostly just trying to target like small and independent topics more than anything. And then like at work, I also have some notes about like our deployment and like our development and like whatever stuff, and like those are also basically just a series of markdown files that are independent. So I don't know, this I just use markdown files, even though it's probably not the best, but yeah. Logic sounds interesting, but yeah, I don't know. Like you need to render the PDF files and then make them available, I guess.
And you can start doing LaTeX shorts.
Oh man, logic is so hard though.
Kayvan has a question. Kayvan, would you like to unmute?
Oops.
Yeah, thank you.
Which tab am I looking for?
Enjoyed your presentation. Thank you very much. I've been at your GitHub many times and read your articles many times. Thank you for putting those together. I used Nix recently, and there are times that I need to look at multiple projects at the same time, and they each have their own Nix dependencies. And I use Emacs. My IDE gets really confused when I go across these different projects because the dependencies are not in one global place where I can just share them. And I was wondering if you've experienced that. If so, how do you address that?
So you're talking about basically like the problem with having the path set with your environment variables and stuff, right? So
yeah,
like I basically just give up on the problem for the most part, to be honest. But the way I work with Emacs is also quite strange. I never use a daemon, so I basically always start up Emacs from within a project with the Nix shell, and then when I open it with that, I have some package that will load up the environment and put the path stuff there. But yeah, basically I really only work with one project per Emacs instance. And if I have multiple projects, then I will just open multiple Emacs instances per project. So yeah, sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, I think that's what I need to do as well. Thank you.
Can I just jump in on that? Are you okay with this? Because I had a similar problem, and the thing that kind of worked for me was basically just using direnv, and there is a supplementary project called Nix direnv. And so what it does is you add one extra file in your root of your project, which is like a single file which just says use Nix. And what it does is eventually, like when you enter the shell, not Nix shell, just your normal shell, and you enter this project, it will load all the paths to that shell as if you were to enter Nix shell on your own. So you kind of get all the access to all the shell goodies that you have in your project for free without entering the Nix shell. And then you can actually configure Emacs to use the same file, so that when you enter any file of your project, it automatically gets all the paths. And then you switch to the other project, it switches to the different configuration. And it works wonders, because I will have two separate projects, for example, that use different stylish Haskell versions, one more recent than the other. And both of them will work with my Emacs. They will format. So one version might use new features, where the other one doesn't have those features. So it works smoothly. And then if you're interested, let me know. I can actually point you to links on GitHub. Where
yeah,
works.
Paul, I'm very interested.
Sure, just DM me.
Pavel, I think you had a question as well.
Yeah, I had a question regarding the examples, but I think it was partially answered, because you've mentioned that the examples were written in Markdown, and that's basically was good enough for you. I was just wondering if writing blocks like that, what I liked about, like, for example, when writing Haskell was like this literate programming, right? When you write a little bit of Haskell code, and then it evaluates, and if by accident it doesn't compile on your new GHC or whatever, the blog post will not build itself. And I've seen like Nixpkgs, I think they use things like that, but I couldn't get my head around how I could write Nix examples so that they would fail if those examples would go obsolete. Do you have any thoughts on that, or you simply just like don't really care?
Yeah, I mean, of course, maybe there's a horrible answer, but like I would prefer to be able to write Word documents using Excel tables, but I don't know. Is it not that they have something like Jupyter notebooks or something? So it's some kind of notebook style programming. Are they not doing that?
Yeah,
That would be my best guess of like what kind of general approach they're trying to take, or what kind of general tools they use to do this.
I would, yeah, I would wonder, like, if, for example, like using even maybe like org, what's it called, like Bubble, or I don't remember. There's a mode on Emacs that does it, but I wonder if it's even feasible for Nix examples, right? Because it will build a derivation. I don't know, like in the examples that you have in your posts, do you see this having a value, or you would just rather copy paste whatever?
I personally, I don't like complicated tools, so I would just copy paste. And yeah, like like I said, like my approach is that I want to explain the intention of the input and the expected output. So like, I really don't want to tie myself to the actual output that I get, because yeah, I don't know. So like out of laziness, but also just difference in philosophy. But yeah, I think if you are writing some kind of if you were like the official documentation or something, then like, yeah, you would probably need some kind of complicated build process or like notebooks or something, right? Yeah.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
also, sorry, I forgot to say that I have used some kind of org mode thing that would build code snippets. So I've used it to build XML diagrams and use the pictures inline, or like generate the inline tag image thing, so that when I render the org files to HTML, then they would have the inline pictures there. But I wouldn't recommend that, even though I used it before.
Thank you. We have one more question. Were you finished?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. We have one more question from our reigning champion Ulrich.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for the interesting talk. I'm a completely Nix novice, so maybe not so much focusing on writing and talking about Nix, but I have some content question, which is using Nix actually for embedded systems. If you have any pointers there, or if you have any take on the ecosystem, is it used there at all? For me, it seems like it's a good fit. Background, I'm doing stuff on security conscious embedded systems that need updates and so on, where it seems like a good idea to have very defined builds and so on, but I haven't found so much.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know about this, and I feel like I've only read some about two different approaches. So that, like, one was that people were trying to use Nix in like certain architectures or whatever, right? So I've read about that kind of thing before, but I'm not sure what the progress is on that. And then the other thing I've read before is basically people using Nix to produce the tooling, then which would run to produce like the artifacts you need. So like, yeah, I really don't know much anything about this topic, but like yeah, you probably would have to just ask in next discourse or something about this.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, that does it for the questions, and I think we can wrap up the meetup for this week. Maybe we can stick around for a little while and have like a social time after I end the recording. I just want to thank you again, Justin, for joining us this evening and preparing the talk and being the amazing presenter that you always are.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks to everyone who listened to my rambling, and yeah.
This won't be the last time we see you, I hope.
Probably not.
Okay.